Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I am incredibly proud to announce that Cabinet has agreed to repeal and replace the Arms Act 1983 with a new law that's fairer, fit for purpose, and improves the safety of New Zealanders. The changes that I am announcing today are targeted at keeping firearms out of the hands of criminals while making compliance easier for licensed firearm owners through sensible changes that reduce regulatory burdens. The current law has been modified dozens of times since it came into force over 40 years ago, with many of those changes being rushed through with little to no scrutiny. The result is a complex, confusing, and bureaucratic patchwork that makes it difficult for licensed firearm owners to comply while not adequately keeping the public safe. The new law will be written in plain English, structured logically and with public safety at its core. Before getting into the specifics, I want to acknowledge the senseless and tragic events of March 15, 2019. That day shook our nation to its core. Never before had we experienced such a horrific attack on our nation and its people. None of us want to see that again. Everyone should understand how vital it is to keep firearms out of the wrong hands, and that is my goal in these reforms. We all want a New Zealand where families are safe, communities are secure, and those who abuse firearms face the full force of the law. But the laws that followed March 15th were rushed, confused, and unfair. They punished the wrong people. They targeted the responsible, law-abiding New Zealanders instead of the criminals and the gangs. Good law is not made in a panic. It's made with clear heads, sound evidence, and respect for those who already do the right thing. Public safety and respect for licensed firearm owners are not in conflict. They actually depend on each other. It is my hope that all parties see the amount of work that I've put into getting this right so that we can have enduring law that lasts. I have previously invited opposition parties to engage with me on firearms reform. I extend that offer to them again today. For public safety, there are a number of changes in the bill. Gang membership will be an automatically disqualifying factor for holding a firearms licence. Gang members represent less than 1% of New Zealand's adult population, yet are linked to 23% of all firearm offences. A statutory red flag system is being established, with clarified information sharing so police and other agencies can continue to signal to the firearms regulator when they have relevant intel that might trigger a review of whether a licensed firearm owner remains a fit and proper person. Penalties for over 60 Arms Act offences will be increased, and 8 new offences will be created, including new offences to reduce firearms entering the black market, such as for straw buying and possessing a firearm without identification markings where they have been intentionally removed. We will also plug gaps in the law to address new and emerging technologies such as the illegal manufacture of 3D printed firearms and parts and the possession of digital files without a firearms licence. Criminals are on notice that if they break the law, they can expect harsher penalties with increased fines and longer prison sentences. Licensed firearm owners will benefit from simpler rules that make it easier for them to use and store their firearms safely. One particular issue that has been raised with me is the ambiguity around secure storage requirements. In practice, the current rules are interpreted as requiring firearms and ammunition to be stored at the licensed firearm owner's primary residence, but sometimes that is not the most appropriate nor secure place. The changes will clarify that secure storage can be at any premise approved by the regulator. This will mean that students in university halls, renters, or those living with someone with a mental health concern can more safely and securely store their firearms at another, more suitable location. The new Act will also include practical changes to ensure licensed firearm owners can continue to safely enjoy and benefit from the responsible use of firearms. This will support hunters, businesses, farmers, museum operators, pest controllers, collectors, and of course, all New Zealanders who will benefit from improved safety, a stronger economy, and thriving biodiversity. To rebuild the trust of law-abiding licensed firearm owners, the Firearms Regulator, currently the Firearms Safety Authority, must be reformed to ensure it operates openly and transparently. A new regulator will be established, headed by an independent Chief Executive appointed by the Governor-General. The Chief Executive will report solely to the responsible Minister, with the Ministry of Justice providing oversight and monitoring. Rebuilding trust also requires there to be a clearer separation of information held by the Firearms Regulator and information held by the New Zealand Police. To that end, sworn officers will not be able to serve as either the Chief Executive or be directly employed by the regulator. Police officers will still have access to the essential information they need to enforce the law and will still be able to check whether a person they're dealing with holds a firearms licence or if the firearms are stored at a specific address. We're replacing the current internal review process with a new Firearms Licensing Review Committee. This will address perceptions among some members of the community that the current internal review process is not sufficiently independent. This is essential for ensuring there is trust in the licensing system, improving compliance, and ensuring applicants or licensed firearm owners renewing their licences are treated fairly without needing to go to the district court. This is just a small number of changes that will be in the Arms Bill. Further information will be on the Beehive website, which I understand the journalists here have been supplied. Licensed firearm owners have been unfairly scapegoated for the actions of criminals too long. This law focuses instead on fixing what matters, actually making people safer with a fair system that works for all New Zealanders. More than 8,000 submissions and 700,000 individual points of feedback have helped shape this work. There will be further opportunity for all New Zealanders to have their say through a full 6-month select committee process. And finally, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all those who have supported me in this process so far. Right now, I'm happy to take any questions.
Many people thought it was really a radical overhaul of the law and a watering down of the law following the changes that were made after 2019, but it's not.
That's right, and I never had an intention to do that. Commentators out there labelled me as a lobbyist and said that I was going to come in and do a whole lot of radical changes. We needed common sense changes that put the public first and have great respect for the licensed firearm owners who have already been deemed to be fit and proper people. My golden apples and their golden barrel, I'm trying to protect them and make sure that we go after those criminals that have had access to illegally held firearms.
You mentioned that the laws passed in the wake of the 2019 terror attack were rushed and some of them unnecessary. What changes made then are you reversing?
A lot of the changes I'm not reversing. Some of them I'm clarifying, some of them I'm putting into a system that will work better for those that are trying to comply with the law. To give you an example, one of the loopholes that I've closed, again with magazines that should have been picked up in 2019, should have been picked up in 2020, is that when we made changes on large capacity magazines, no one thought about the pistols. They all have large capacity magazines, or the majority of them do. So one of the changes that we're making to change a loophole there is that only a person with the correct pistol endorsement will be able to possess and purchase large capacity magazines for pistols. So it's about how do we respect the firearms community who want to be and are trying to be law abiding, but more importantly, how do we protect New Zealand society from some of the horrid crimes that we've seen over recent years?
Did you seek at all to expand access to semi-automatic firearms that are currently prohibited, soon to be called restricted?
Yes, I did. Within our coalition negotiations, I set out a proposal where we would be able to have semi-automatics with large capacity magazines used in a very strict club environment for competition use. That was not agreed to by my coalition partners. We did invoke and agree to disagree on that aspect. But when looking at the bigger picture, I think that we have a lot of really good stuff within this Arms Act, and so I was prepared to do the agree to disagree and not die in a ditch over it.
Why did you seek that?
I have constituents who are law-abiding, who were not part of the March 15 massacre, who's asked me to, on their behalf, allow them to continue to enter world championships and national championships. They did nothing wrong. I tried. I did not succeed there, so we had an agree to disagree.
So, and why was it not worth dying in a ditch over, as you say?
Because when you look at the public safety aspects of everything else that's in this Arms Act, there is a win not only for the public of New Zealand, but for every licensed firearms owner in this country. There are 230,000 of them, and this bill, once it becomes an act, shows them respect. It is in plain English, and everybody will benefit from that.
Ex-coalition agreement to have the Firearms Safety Authority put under the Ministry of Justice or the Department of Internal Affairs has also not taken place in this set of reforms. Did you agree to disagree on that? Why has that not occurred?
Yes, what I campaigned on was a complete uplift and shift of the Firearms Safety Authority out of New Zealand Police. When we looked into how we would go about doing it, the cost of it was exceptional. I was quoted over $500 million in order to be able to do this. There was also concern around the information that is captured by both agencies. We have been told that the Firearms Safety Authority is an independent business unit of New Zealand Police, but at the time of trying to separate them, we found that they were just so meddled with each other that to do that complete separation would risk the information that is held by both agencies. We need New Zealand frontline police to still be supported, to be able to still have access to information. We need Firearms Safety Authority to be able to do that as well. So instead of being an independent business unit, they will now be an independent statutory authority hosted by New Zealand Police so that they can continue to access each other's information. But the most important thing is there will be no blue shirts in the Firearms Safety Authority. There are currently 15 uniformed police who will go back to police, and New Zealand Police will deal with enforcement only and will have nothing at all to do with regulation, operational or administration part of the regulator, who is the Firearms Safety Authority.
Why was that important to take the uniformed officers out and have some separation from police?
We need to rebuild the trust and confidence between the regulator and the licensed firearms community. That has diminished severely over the last 6 years. Part of this is allowing police to get on with doing their core business, which is in the enforcement of it, allowing the regulator to be respectful to the community and to be able to make their decisions without that enforcement aspect over every decision that they make.
So why was that trust broken though? Can you just explain it for someone that doesn't have a firearms license? Why was there tension there?
A lot of the blame for March 15 was directed at the licensed firearm owning community, including from those high up within New Zealand Police who stood and said that they did nothing wrong at the time that it occurred. Licensed firearm owners have found themselves the subject of police searches, police raids. They had to hand in a lot of their firearms, which were confiscated when they did nothing wrong. It's been a few years of a diminishing respect. We need to be able to get that respect back, not only for New Zealand Police, but for the regulator, the licensed firearm owning community, and for the general public out there, who many have this vision that we are nothing more than criminals ourselves. That is not the case. Licensed firearm owners have to go through rigorous and continuous fit and proper assessments. The criminals do not. I'm drawing a line in the sand between those who are fit and proper and those who are not.
As a licensed firearms owners, what do you think they'll make of the changes? Do you think they'll be happy that you've struck the right balance there and the lead just moved a bit?
I have not shared any of this information with people in the licensed firearm owning community. I hope that they are happy with the changes that I've made. I guess I'm going to find out about that over the next half a day.
Why was it going to cost $500 million to create an entirely separate organisation, and how much did it cost to keep it under the police umbrella, albeit separately?
Yes, well, the reason for $500 million was looking also at the IT. So currently the Firearms Registry sits with the Firearms Safety Authority, but the old Firearms Registry and information on an individual sits under the police NEAR system. Neither of these agencies would be able to have access to each other's information if I separated them. So part of the $500 million was to rebuild whole new IT systems for both police and the Firearms Safety Authority. What concerned me is that if we rushed that process, we may compromise or jeopardise some of that secure information that both of those outfits hold. So in order to not jeopardise that, to not waste taxpayers' money, I looked at how we could still allow them to share that information. And the best way to do that is to have the authority hosted by police and allowing police to then share their information, or both of them, and a red flag system, which we are instigating where other agencies like SIS will be able to share information with the authority and backwards and forwards. And in doing this, it means that we not only save the taxpayer money, but we are saving the information from being compromised in any way.
When it comes to the question of trust, I mean, how can you explain how the red flag system will work? You know, I mean, SIS, who else could raise a red flag against someone? Would that make people therefore reluctant to engage with other agencies if it may therefore impact on their sort of status as a firearms owner?
Well, I'm thinking about the SIS GCSB as an example. We do have some people who go overseas and unfortunately get radicalised over there. That is information that one agency might hold, but when they come back to New Zealand, it may not be passed on to others. We want to make sure that not every little tale is told on somebody, but the important information gets to the right people at the right time.
So it's for the sharp end of things, it's not necessarily for like...
It's not for driving offences and stuff like that. Although if you see somebody has enough driving offences that they earn 100 demerit points and they're going to lose their licence, their driver licence, you'd expect that sort of information to be passed on. But if somebody has one speeding ticket, you wouldn't expect the authorities to spend time on that.
There's an element in the changes where firearms have become prohibited after 2019 and 2020 can be disabled, permanently disabled, in order for the person who possesses them to become a lawful owner of them. Is that basically a get out of jail free card for people who have those firearms still?
The way that I have structured this, and the reason why I have structured this, is because most of New Zealand were told that semi-automatics were banned after 2019. But the focus was not just on semi-automatics. There were quite a large number of other types of firearms that were captured, including, for example, tubular magazine lever actions. We had changed the capacity of magazines from 15 down to 10, and a lot of these tubular magazines are 15 rounds. People are still just finding out now, 6 years on, that those firearms are actually prohibited firearms. And when they've taken them to a gunsmith to ask them to be modified, a gunsmith has put their hands up and said, "Can't touch it, sorry, that's illegal, you're in trouble." This is about making sure that guns that are currently sitting in the grey market become legal and get into the white market so we know where they are and who's got them, and allowing people the opportunity to have them modified or deactivated without being prosecuted for doing so.
Have you changed your mind on the firearms registry?
I still do not agree with the Firearms Registry, especially in its current state. I see lots of problems with it. And I have not entered the registry, the new registry myself yet either, but I've not had a circumstance where I've had to, a triggering event as they call it. Although I will state that should I have a triggering event, I will enter it because I'm compliant, law-abiding and fit and proper.
Why don't you like firearms registry, and why didn't you get rid of it if that was the source of so much of the IT cost?
Well, I'd like to, but you do have to get coalition agreement with this, and I could not get that. As part of my reasoning for why I don't want to enter the registry yet, I need to be confident in the security of its information.
It doesn't sound like you're building trust with the firearm licence owning community then if you're casting doubt on its security.
I'm just saying what my personal position is with the registry. I will state that the reason why I'm like that is because I have had my information compromised before. I will get my feedback from the firearms community, of which over 50% have already entered the registry. And like I say, should I have a triggering event, I too will also enter the registry. But I'm also hopeful that by the time I'm made to do so, improvements in the registry will be made as well. Nevertheless, once I get that triggering event, I will do so.
Are you also hopeful that maybe you'll have more political power in the future and can achieve the aims that you have?
You never know what the future might hold.
You standing up at this podium and announcing a complete overhaul, this is the very reason that you got into politics, right? The
Yes.
one reason that you got into it was to do this. Are you telling me now that what you're announcing isn't actually comprehensive enough for you? You haven't actually achieved what you wanted to by keeping the firearms registry there?
I think the very first thing that we have achieved is an increase in public safety outcomes with this Arms Act, and that was one of the main goals that I said I wanted to achieve, and I feel confident that I'm achieving that. I feel like I've got 90 to 95% of what I wanted, but if you look at what we campaigned on in 2023, you'll see that I also wanted to restructure the licensing system to make it based on experience and knowledge of firearm owners instead of everybody entering at the same pace. The most important part of any piece of legislation is the implementation of it. So while this has been 6 years of talk, 2 years of hard work, actually it's only about 25% of the job done. Implementing the Arms Act, the separation of Firearms Safety Authority from New Zealand Police, the other aspects of this Act, that's actually the big job, and that's going to be next term.
Would you be able to explain exactly what you're doing now and how much priority or urgency there is around ensuring that you make those fixes around the registry? You obviously have concerns around the safety of that information. What are you doing right now to ensure that, say, like 50% of firearms owners are in it?
So the Firearms Registry at the moment currently sits under New Zealand Police, not under my role as Associate Justice. They are working constantly on upgrading, putting information into the Firearms Registry. A bit of an issue that we have at the moment is the bell curve. The bell curve has occurred every 5th and 6th year of each decade. So back in the 1980s, when we moved from a lifetime licence to a 10-year licence, a lot of people, the majority of New Zealanders with licences, moved over to that regime in 1984, 85 and 86. Then, every 10 years, on the 4th, 5th and 6th year, we get this big group of people trying to re-licence. It's put a huge amount of pressure on the Firearms Safety Authority, who quite frankly right now can't work on the registry while they're trying to renew so many. To give you an understanding of that, it's usually around 6,000 to 9,000 renewals every year. But in the 5th and 6th year of each decade, such as now, 2025, 55,000 people are trying to renew their licences. Next year, 50,000 people will try to renew their licences before we start coming back down to 6,000 to 9,000. So I need the Firearms Safety Authority to be focusing on getting these renewals and other core BAU done, while they also look to work on the registry in the future. It's really important that they have trust and confidence in the systems that they have as well, and I want to support them to be able to integrate new systems if they do, upgrade what they've got when they can, but also get through this backlog that they've got. That's one of the reasons why we have also put within the law the ability for the regulator to extend licences by 3 years in an effort to flatten that bell curve over upcoming decades.
Any reason you didn't change the name of the law, just replacing the Arms Act with the Arms Act?
It's the Arms Act. It's as simple as that. I don't want to confuse anybody. We're just upgrading what is a really old system that's been mucked around with too much. Putting it in plain English, it's still going to be the Arms Act, how we all behave and operate with firearms in New Zealand in a fit and proper and responsible manner.
Is there any other names that you considered?
No?
In anticipating potential criticism, is there anything when the bill's drafted, will there be anything in the bill which, compromises safety, expands access, makes it easier for people to obtain firearms and, commit crimes or do harms?
I certainly hope not. I expect everybody will go through the bill when it's released, and they'll pick that out and they'll be able to ask me questions, and hopefully we can, if we do find anything like that, we can mitigate it at Select Committee. Hopefully I can just speak you through what you may be concerned about or what people may be concerned about, and talk through how it would not be a concern and why.
And on the flip side, if Colpo comes out this afternoon and says this is inadequate, firearm owners are still, unnecessarily scrutinised and such, what's your message to them?
Then it's up to them to make sure that they submit and they get others to submit on the things that they're not happy with. That's the whole point of having a thorough and robust Select Committee process, is that we can hear from everyone, not just Colfo and the firearm owners, but from the community that does not own firearms. This is why we need to have a 6-month Select Committee process. We've not had it for the last 6 years.
Are you confident that there's going to be sufficient resources, or what resources, I guess, will there be for the new regulator to ensure that they can do the job that they need to do?
I do believe that there will be significant resources. Part of what we're doing is no one is going to be losing their jobs. We're going to keep the same people but in different positions. For example, Firearms Safety Authority currently have staff of over 500. They'll be losing 15, the blue shirts, the New Zealand Police, who will be taken back into police and posted into other positions. So we're not going to be losing anyone, and we think the implementation will be okay. I have commissioned a business case to be done to actually figure out the exact cost once we do the separation. Now that there's an understanding of what enforcement and what administrative and regulatory functions will be, it'll make it easier for the business case to determine what the cost will be. Not yet. I mean, I'm looking at anywhere from 20 million to what was the high initial ask of $500 million. So the very much the lower end is what I'm expecting.
And no additional staff, though, just the staff that they already have?
Well, at this stage, we think that they can carry on with doing what they're doing, a BAU, without much interruption. The Ministry of Justice will be the ones that are overseeing the new agency. The Chief Executive will report to the Minister. Nobody will be reporting to New Zealand Police whatsoever, but we do need to make sure that hands are still being held in some way so that we can share that information and police frontline are still protected throughout all of this.
What's being changed with 3D printed gun plans?
Yes. So with the 3D printed blueprints or plans, only those people who have a firearms licence will be able to be in possession, legal possession, of a 3D printed plan if they have other equipment with them, such as the 3D printer and the components that they need to print. This means that if somebody just has a 3D printed plan, which say a teenager might be able to download from the internet, and they don't have a firearms licence, that'll be okay for them. But if they happen to have a 3D printer and they happen to have the components to print and they have the plan without a licence, they will be committing an offence.
Police seem to want a blanket ban on these plans. Why not go that far?
The reason why I'm not prepared to go that far is because we have legitimate businesses here in New Zealand who are 3D printing firearms, and they are sending them offshore and overseas. It would appear after investigation that we are the only country in the world using the modern technology to make lighter rifles, stocks and components. I do not want to get into their business and stop them from doing what they're doing. We are world leading in this area. So it's about making controls over who has possession and ensuring that only those with licenses will have possession. Another aspect of this is because we're at the bottom of the world, It's really hard to get spare parts and components here because a lot of these parts are restricted. So in order for a licensed firearm owner to get a part which might be just a spring or a screw, they should be able to 3D print them themselves because they may not be able to utilise a firearm if they can't get that part. So that's why it's so important that they, with licences, are able to still make something if they need it. The safety aspect that I've put here, though, is that should somebody, just a standard firearms licence holder, create a firearm, a stock and make something, they can't just sell it. They have to sell it through a business retailer who in turn will check that that firearm is actually in a safe condition and should be sold.
Did you meet with Chris Cahill over these changes?
No.
Why not?
He's gone.
But before he was gone?
No, and as I mentioned before, no one in the firearms community were even aware of this. We had leaks at the beginning when we were trying to do the firearm prohibition orders with clubs and ranges. I did not want messages to get out there that I was doing something that I wasn't. I mean, you started your questioning, Lloyd, already with people thought you were going to do something else. I actually wanted to be able to just focus on firearm safety, on public safety, on compliance. I think and felt that my background in firearm safety and education, talking to the community, talking to the non-licensed firearms community, helped inform me. And of course those 700,000 points that were made during submissions also helped inform me.
You said you extended the invite to opposition to engage with this, did they?
No. So when I first came in as Minister of the Crown, I invited a member from each party, Labour, the Greens and Te Pāti Māori, to come to my office. I said to them that we would be making a raft of changes, and of course that was clubs and ranges, firearms prohibition orders and the Bigger Arms Act. I invited them at any stage to come into my office if they had any questions, if they wanted clarification, if they had concerns about anything, so that we could talk it out. I sat with them, but nobody came back to me. What I will say, though, that when this bill lands, or even with information now, my door is still open to opposition. This is about all of us coming together to make New Zealand a safer place with firearms, and I will keep my door open to opposition so that we can get the best laws once again.
Of the 2019-2020 changes, which of those things did you leave untouched because you concluded that actually they had made the law better or they'd made New Zealand's gun laws safer?
That's a really hard question because there's so much in the Arms Act. What I will say to you is nothing has actually been left untouched. We have rewritten the law in such a way that we have clarified where there were misinterpretations. We've put it in plain English. Where it used to say, you must not, it will now say it's an offence too, and it will list it all out. And then underneath it, it will say a defence to this may be, and it will list some of those defences. This will make it much clearer for the firearms community who saw ambiguity in the past law. So it's not about whether I got rid of something or put something in. It's about, can we make it clearer, or does it need to be there, or does it need to be changed? So there's a lot to unpack there, and it would be quite hard for me to talk through a 200-page document and what stayed and what didn't.
I'll give one example. Licensing application paperwork. That's something some licensed firearms owners groups have said, it's now like 40 pages long.
Yep.
Because of all the additional information that was required as a result of the 2019-2020 changes. Presumably that remains untouched because you think that it's good to gather that information about people when they apply for a firearms license.
So what you're talking about there is actually policy and regulations. It's not in the Arms Act about what it is that a person has to fill out. But taking on board about what I can change in the Arms Act, the visitor licences as an example. So when a visitor applies to come to New Zealand with a firearm, they may be training for a competition that's coming up, or they may want to hunt here in New Zealand. They fill in a huge amount of paperwork, get verifications from their overseas clubs and authorities, and they fill in this extensive paperwork. They get a licence for 12 months. They come to New Zealand, and when they leave, it may be a week later, that licence expires. And if they come back a couple of weeks later or a month later to train, they have to go through the entire process again. So what I can do within the Arms Act is say to them, you don't have to do that. Your 12-month licence will last for 12 months, but every time you enter the country, the authorities will look to check that nothing has changed. You just won't have to go through all that excessive paperwork when things haven't obviously changed over the past few weeks or months.
What's the process now for the legislation?
So we have the Arms Act in the Q4 plan of this government to have its first reading before the end of the year. That will certainly happen. We only have a few weeks left, and I'm in the hands of the Leader of the House as to when that will go through. We will then go into a 6-month select committee process, and I invite everybody who has an interest in firearms to read the bill and to submit at that stage. I'm also asking for an extension on the submission process because it's likely that this could actually land over the Christmas holidays. Of course, most licensed firearm owners are outdoors people and they won't be sitting at their computers. So I'm hoping to get an extension on that submission timeframe. We would then expect to have the bill back and go through all final stages by June, July 2026. Of course, we then move into campaigning. And as I mentioned earlier, the implementation stage in the next term of government will be one of the most important stages.
So you want this wrapped up before the next?
Well, it's actually part of the coalition agreement that the bill will go through all stages before the end of the term. And this is why we've had robust but good cabinet discussions and agreement over the policies that's within the bill.
Can I just ask about, sorry if I've got the number wrong, but you were talking about thousands and thousands of submissions that have come before this, but you were also saying that you hadn't spoken to the firearms community. Could you sort of just clarify this?
Sure. What I mean by not speaking to the licensed firearm owning community is about the actual policies that are in the bill. Nobody knew about that. I have been constructively working with the different disciplines of firearms community to help inform what this is. During the review of the firearms registry, we went out to the public and asked them to give us their views on the Arms Act. And over 8,000 submissions were received, but they made in those 8,000 submissions over 700,000 really valid points. So we gathered those points, collated them, looked to see if it's what we were hearing from the majority of the community as well, and we took those things that we thought the community really needed us to address in this Arms Act rewrite and moved on it.